Welcome to the presentation for today. We're going to get started here in a few moments, folks. Just wanted to come on and introduce ourselves, and we'll begin the screen share in a moment, so you're in the right place. My name is Chad Callahan. I'm from Plaza College. I'll be one of your hosts today. And we also have joining us is Warner Babcock, who is of AM Private Enterprises and also the founder of the New York Family Enterprise Center. We have Mike Schul from JW Hampton, and we also have Jonathan White from White Coffee Enterprises. So we'll get started in a few moments. Welcome, glad you're here.
I think we're ready to go, Chad.
Very good, very good. Well, welcome everybody again. I'll reintroduce the speakers and the participants that put together today's presentation as we move along, but just a quick wave if you can see my screen because it's Zoom and I want to make sure that you can see the presentation. Great, okay, good. Well, welcome again to today's presentation on understanding the family business, provided to you by the Family Owned Businesses Committee. It's a subcommittee of the Queen's Chamber, an effort that we have come together and done several meetings to get some ideas, get some thoughts together for our family business members in what can help our family businesses grow and thrive and create a lasting enterprise. Today would not have been possible without the hard work of our committee, and specifically the hard work of Warner Babcock from the AM Private Enterprises, and he's also the founder of the New York Family Enterprise Center. So thank you, Warner. We have Mike Schul from JW Hampton. Everybody knows Mike. Mike's a great guy. Thank you, Mike. And we also have Jonathan White from White's Coffee. So everybody worked really hard, but thank you, gentlemen, for your assistance. So I'd like to ask Warner to say a few words to get us started, because this is the first presentation in a series of sessions devoted to helping those who live and work in family-owned businesses better understand and navigate the community that we are all in. And I think Warner will say it very well. So Warner, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chad. And maybe before we get into this session, I think you're all on mute, and please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to present your questions, and then there'll be time at the end of the session to also field questions, from the group. This session is really sort of an overview and a first step in understanding the family business system. It's a system, and Chad will go through this, but it's very important to become oriented towards understanding how to look at the different parties, not only the roles and responsibilities, the interaction and the overlaps, but also, how you can address them and think about them to try to focus on the key issues, and also maybe get your different family members and other parties in the group and the subgroups together to build a very healthy family, business system. And, from this, I think in future sessions, we'll be guided by, this beginning and, with some structure and with input from everybody, not only on the committee, but also feedback from the participants. But welcome. And Chad, it's yours.
Thank you, Warner. Before we get into the nuts and bolts, we'll do a brief agenda so you see what's coming down the road in today's meeting. So we're going to talk about the attributes of the modern family business. I think family business is probably the oldest structure in the world, And today things move at a very fast clip. So we're going to talk about some of those attributes. Something that we all can kind of come together and agree on, some shared challenges of the family business dynamic of that enterprise, presented by Mike Schul. We also have some effective strategies for improvement, but to do that, we would talk about really the three circle model, which is changed the way I look at our own business after Warner introduced us to it. It's been very helpful. So we're going to share that with you today. I'm going to go over some methods to strengthen the family dynamic so that you can build a better family run business. It's interesting because I know everybody's thinking, well, it's, all businesses are different. Yes, all businesses are different, but trust me, after talking with Mike and Jonathan and Neil and Warner and so many people, we all share many attributes being at family businesses, even if it's across industry lines. And then, of course, we'll wrap it up with ideas to build a great reputation and lasting legacy. So I'll ask Mike to come off mute and talk to us about some shared challenges. I'm going to put them all up for Mike.
Great. Thank you, Chad, for taking the lead on this, throwing this presentation together. Warner, thanks for your valuable input. It's been crucial for us to get to this point. So, and welcome to everyone who's joining us today. I think challenges is really a good place to start, and not because misery loves company, but although that is part of it, but because really all of us play a role in the family business that we work for to make sure that that company is not misery. And it's not easy at times, especially seems like there's some kind of relationship with the more family members of the business, the more challenging it gets. So regardless of whether you're joining us as an entrepreneur who just started your company and you're hoping that it will be successful enough to pass on to future generations, or hypothetically, if maybe you were dragged into the office as a kid to do filing and copying and all that stuff, long before Take Your Kid to Work Day was a thing, the Family Owned Business Committee is here for all of us, regardless of where you're at on this journey and struggle and all that good stuff. So the Queen's Chamber, they formed this committee basically to bring together people who have similar business challenges as it relates to family business, in addition to all the regular stuff that we deal with every single day, regardless of whether you're a family business or not. So in front of us, Chad put together this list of examples of general challenges, and I'm sure we can relate to a lot of them. As we look on the list, I was looking the first time and I can relate to a lot of them, but also have specific examples of how it relates to me and my family. And I remember the first day that I spent as an actual paid employee of JW Hampton, not as like working summer and maybe getting a free lunch out of it each day or something, but actually a paycheck was coming. And I walk into the office the first day and I see my aunt sitting at the desk and my mother sitting at a desk and our coworkers, and I see my brother, and then my father had his own private office. And so, I said, "Good morning, Mom. Good morning, Aunt Sue." And right away, my brother was like, "Oh, that's Maureen and that's Susan." And, from that day forward, I learned, okay, we're in an office here, no more family stuff. The problem became when at social events or on the weekends or birthday parties or something, when I would refer to them as Maureen or Susan, and it was like, oh, no, I am Mom on the weekends and on birthdays and stuff like that. So it's a really, you got to be careful about that. And that's one of the things on the list here: family dynamics and emotions. Emotions. It's sometimes hard, when I'm going to exaggerate a little bit, but if my mother would walk into the office and say to my father, "You left the cap off on the toothpaste," like, all right, we don't need to be talking about that in front of the employees and stuff like that. But it's a reality. And some family members are better at drawing that line that business is business. And what stays at home, what stays in the office, stays in the office. And other people are not as good at it. And because someone's not as good as it doesn't mean that they get treated any differently. The challenge for us as family business members is to bring that person closer to where we all want to be as far as communication is concerned. So I think that's important. And that's something that we will deal with probably in further webinars or get-togethers about how to communicate as a family. You know, everything, I'm always reminded, everything that happens in the office, unfortunately, has consequences at the Thanksgiving table or at Sunday dinner or something like that. It's hard to leave work at home, especially because as a family business, as an entrepreneur, you're spending all day putting out fires in a lot of cases. And the only time you get to maybe talk to a family member about business, about future planning, is at that dinner table or when you're out of the office. And that's probably not the best time to do it, because then it just mixes everything up and gets people sometimes angry when they wouldn't be angry. So again, we formed this committee to try to bring people together to share their challenges and their successes when it comes to working for family-owned businesses. So I think as we learn more about each other and where we're at in each stage, we can then plan events that would bring the most value to all of us in the family-owned business community. I think one topic that will be addressed probably in the near future is succession. And you know, I clarified not to be confused with secession, which I have thought about a few times with the family business. But you know, how is the company going to get passed on to future generations? It's a critical conversation to have, and it, you know, in our family, it becomes more, as my parents age, it becomes more of a hot topic, if you will. In particular, because my great grandfather, he had one son, my grandfather, who he passed the company on to. My grandfather had one son, my father, who he passed the company on to. And now my father has 3 children. One smart child who got out of the family business and is a school teacher. And then his 2 stupid sons, me and my brother, who are in the family business. And it's not just a matter of succession, excuse me, of who is going to maybe run the company, what our roles are going to be and stuff like that, but also who has ultimate decision-making power. I mean, I don't think my father's on this webinar, but I know it's recorded. So my father has ultimate decision-making power. But as we've gotten older, my brother and I have had more influence over the decisions and stuff. And now my brother's younger than me, but he's been in the company longer. So does his opinion have more weight than my opinion, and things like that? And that's things that, you know, you think you can navigate on your own, but it's always better to talk to other family business members, people who are going through the same thing, people who have gone through the same thing, to get a different perspective, because it's sometimes hard to navigate when there's so many strong personalities at times. So I think that's one really great benefit that we're going to get out of this committee as we grow. So that's really what I wanted to share. As I pass the baton back to Chad, I just want to extend another welcome to everyone who's participated. A thank you. Please become active with us, because we need all those different perspectives. We need ideas, not just people who have done it through 2 or 3 or 4 generations, but people who are just facing it in today's world, which is new for all of us. Thanks, guys.
That was great, Mike. Thank you so much. And, you know, I just want to reiterate something that Mike said, which is that, you know, one thing that binds us all together, Mike's in global shipping, right? So Mike's company is in the middle of all those shipping containers, container ships backed up off the ports. That's Mike's fault. No, I'm just kidding. That's Mike solving that, right? We're in education at Plaza College. Others are in real estate. So we all come from different angles, but at the end of the day, everything that Mike said about coming into that room and learning how you're going to live and work with your family in the context of the family business versus the Thanksgiving Day table, if you will, that's something that you don't get in big business enterprise, publicly traded companies. I just know because I've worked in those companies, and it's so vastly different. So it does bind us all together. And I think we found the name for our next topic, Michael. I think it will be succession, not secession. And I like that a lot. So before we get into something called the 3-circle model of the family business system, I want to just introduce where this all came from. I did not invent this, and I am trying not to plagiarize. I want to give you the right information as to where this came from. And of course, you know, Warner really clued us all into this, but this concept is really interesting and helps us understand the channels of the business. And it was developed by some very smart people at the Harvard Business School named Renato Taglieri and John Davis in 1978. And obviously, there's been very little information out there on family businesses. We live and work and are the backbone of this country, yet there's not really a formality to it. In terms of checks and balances. There's no SEC for family businesses. It's for publicly traded companies. So things like this really help. And I'm going to ask Warner to help me along with this presentation, because I am still a student of this concept called the three circle model. But just to introduce it, a family business has at its core three circles, if you will. And those circles are the ownership, the family, and the business. And if you think about it, in the most simple example, a husband and wife who own a pizzeria. Okay, I love that example because there's one around the block from me. And a husband and wife own the pizzeria. They both own the pizzeria. Actually, in this case, the husband founded it, right? Then he married, so he owns it. Then there's the family that works there, right? His wife. And then there is the delivery man or the delivery gal, or the guy who brings in the cheese every day, or maybe it's the guy who opens up the shop and gets the dough started at 4 a.m. This is the simplest version of what you see on the screen. Warner, any comments just before we dive into the more complexities surrounding the three circles?
I think it's really great that Mike shared his story about the confusion between, the workplace and, the family, what goes on at home. And using this three circle model, it will help everyone separate out their roles and responsibilities in each one of these groups. Otherwise, they just overlap and they become very confusing. And it's very hard to start professionalizing your family business without, approaching it by identifying which group you're in, and when you're talking or making decisions, from which group are you speaking from? And we call it hats. What hat are you wearing? So I think this is a very important diagram, and what John Davis and so forth have done here is just a great first step, getting everybody oriented.
Great. And speaking of the overlap, there's something here I'm just going to read off the screen. As a result of this overlap of the three groups, there are actually 7 interest groups that present, each with its own legitimate perspectives, goals, and dynamics. The long-term success of the family business system depends on the functioning and mutual support of each of these groups together. And to better see that, what we'll do is we'll take these 3 circles and we're going to recast them into that. So now you can see where they intersect, and we're going to start picking off the 7 groups. So at the core, and this is correct me if I'm wrong, Warner, is this a Venn diagram? I believe it is a Venn diagram where you have interceding circles and you look for the things in between, right?
Right. Yeah.
Kind of a very complex Venn diagram with 3 circles. Usually it's just 2 circles, but here we have 3. And as the core 3 channels come together, you have these people like Mike, like myself, that are in the family. They are owners and they are employees. They work there, right? That's the core group. Then you have family owners, right? Notice that they're not in the business area. They do not work there. My father calls these professional beneficiaries as a joke. I think that was kind of a fun way to say it, but there's also a little bit of, you could hear it there. So then you have the family owners. Then you have non-family owner employees. Not every family business, certainly not this one, has non-family owner employees. But there are certain businesses that do this. And of course, then right there, you have family employees, which are, I used to be one of these, where I am a family member. I work here, but I don't have ownership, so I don't get say over it. Or maybe I do get say over it because that's the way it goes. Then you have just the family members. So an example of this for years would have been my mom, right? My father was the president, or is the president of our college, and my mom knew what was going on. We talked about it at home. She knew everything that was there. She was not working in the business. nor was she an owner. So there you have a family member. Now, by the way, she works here because everybody at the end of the day winds up working for the family business. And then you have non-family employees. This, for Plaza College, I speak from it, is the vast majority of the employees. We have 180 employees, and they are all a member of our extended family, but they're not all Callahan. And that's an important thing because we have to make sure that we are addressing them and taking care of them, and cultivating them and growing them, because they are what make this whole thing possible for us. And then finally, you have non-family, non-manager owners. Again, kind of a niche group that doesn't often exist in the traditional family business, but worth mentioning. These 7 groups really are the multitude of interests within the 3-circle model. And I'll now that I've oriented you to all that and given you a couple of examples, Warner, anything to point out here for the group?
Yeah, I think the very center of the Venn diagram where you have family owner employees, and that typically is the CEO in many family businesses. And it's very important that the CEO, like anybody else in this, in these groups, when they're speaking in meetings, particularly with families and owners and so forth, is to express, their points, from what position that they're speaking, from, whether it's the CEO or as an owner, as a family member. And that helps begin to delineate, their role, responsibility, and not to be misunderstood that, they're speaking for the family or for the business or as an owner and so forth. But these overlaps are very important to recognize early. And I'd say the other part of this is the real importance that, family members to reach directly into the business, whether they're involved or not, and express their opinions, without going through the ownership, can be very problematic, if you will. So there's a certain sequence of communications, which we can get to later, but this is a very powerful yet simple diagram to begin understanding the family business system. Thank you.
Absolutely. Chad. No, thank you. And like I said, I joined this, I didn't say this yet. I joined this college full-time in 2009, but I have worked here, whether it be working here, in terms of being with my dad or being with my family, or actually doing something my whole life, right? But once I started truly devoting my professional career towards the family business, I didn't have an appreciation for this structure that's in front of you. And now that I do, it really has become more clear to me, at least for us, for Plaza, how we can use this as a guide to say, you know what, I really need to increase the strength of communication, and the really enabling the needs of those interest groups and bringing them to the forefront. So it's very important, very powerful, as Warner said. This is very interesting. This is where that whole big thing we just talked about you can characterize imbalances and what will happen as a result of that. Now, as I look at my screen, I realize I had to make this a little bit smaller than I would have liked to with the circles, but I'm going to narrate for you the imbalances so that the descriptors that come up make sense. So all the way to the left, you have the 3 circles. You have the family, the ownership, and the business. And when there is more focus on the business than any of the other groups, so in other words, if it's weighted towards the business end and not towards the needs of the owners and the needs of the family, this is what can happen. You can have inappropriate estate planning. You can have an information vacuum, if you will, where things don't tend to get transferred over to the owners, and the owners start to feel like they're left out of the loop. The family vision, which was what started the business, can become lost. The values that family keeps dear to them, maybe in their family crest or in their family model, or just what they talk about, can become lost. And it also distances the next generation. And to Mike's point, can make succession planning and cultivating that new group in the future of family owner employees very, very difficult to come by. When the family is the largest and the ownership takes a back seat, the business takes a back seat. So really the needs of the family are, that flag is hoisted highest. Then you have, or can have, things such as inappropriate hiring decisions. The family is prioritized over the needs of the business, the needs of the constituencies. Your attention to your business decreases, so your profitability can go down, your effectiveness can go down, your ability to deliver on your mission can go down. And you can also get the nasty M word, meddling. And meddling is where people, and what we say, when you hear somebody say don't meddle, it's really somebody saying to somebody else who they think they don't understand or whatever, that they are trying to effectuate a process or decision. They don't know and understand the concepts and how it can affect the other two. So this is an interesting element. I'll just cover the ownership piece, and then we'll kick it back to Warner for some context. When ownership is the main focus, so picture the non-employee owner, right? The people that are beneficiaries of the business. You can have harvesting, which actually, now that I have it up there, I have my own idea what harvesting is, but I'll ask Warner. Warner, what are we referring to when we say harvesting?
Usually paying out dividends or selling stock, achieving some kind of liquidity. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a dilution, if you will, of the liquidity or the assets of the business. Sense of entitlement. This could be a really problematic thing for managing the ages when you start to feel like you're entitled, and not that you have to work for it, or not that you have to have a sense of honor and duty. You can have a struggle for power. The people that are there working every day, making everything sing and all the processes continue, or the family that has invested its time and its good name. You can have a really bad struggle for power among those groups. And also, and this is kind of a specific one, but you can have an ultra focus on tax-driven estate planning, which, again, it gets into the more complexities. But Warner, as I've wrapped up this slide and kind of given the basics, can you give us some context to bring it all together?
Sure. And just to that last point, before I, make some overall comments here, the tax-driven estate planning is something that is frequently done, and it's important. But at times, if all the ownership is put into the shares into trusts, and these trustees are very controlling, overbearing, and so forth, and the business loses its familyness, or the beneficiaries are not really benefiting, and the business is not benefiting, this can actually lead to some very unhealthy situations, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but that's what that means. So the idea here is, and this is an ideal, so there's no perfect family business, but is to try to achieve balance, as Chad said, so that one group here, we call them subsystems, is not dominating the entire system. And they do vary from family to family and from time to time, but the whole idea is to try to make sure that each one of these groups is very healthy in their own right. And by healthy, what I mean here is that the family is able to communicate, there's respect, they're able to work together, they're able to manage conflict, they focus on raising the next generation with good values, accountability, hard work, perseverance, and so forth. So the family system, is very, very healthy. And the same is for the ownership, those who are going to be holding shares, that they, as a subsystem, are very good at understanding, their rights, the responsibilities of being an owner, and listening to, not only the business needs, but also the family needs, and taking those under consideration under some type of governance system. And then the business, and I think you all understand this, really well too, is that, you want to make sure that the business is sustainable and that there's reinvestment going on in the business and you're taking care of your constituencies, your employees, your suppliers, your customers, and so forth. And you're good to your community. It's a great place to work in, and your people want to work for your business and so forth. So, it's very important to, focus on each one of these as being healthy, and then that one doesn't dominate over the other. But you will have some ebbs and flows over time and across generations and during transitions and so forth. But you want to try to reach a sort of an equilibrium, and that's the ideal. And communication is a very important part of this, as is education. And so educating each one of the parties that's involved in these groups is a wonderful step to empower people to understand things. And if you can get them to understand these before, let's say, conflicts begin without any empathy or understanding of the other party, that can go a long way to, avoid getting in a irreversible situation where there's just constant friction and battles and so forth. So you try to do all this early, and that's where education can come into play.
Very good. I challenge everybody on the call. I challenge myself. Look at the screen. Which do you see as being your biggest hurdle? Now, don't everybody answer at once. But, in your mind, this will help us to understand how we can perhaps deflate one of these bubbles or reinflate an underrepresented one so that we can be in balance. Because as we get down, as we get to the next slide, which actually Jonathan White from White Coffee helped us put together this slide, because I thought he had really, really great context to provide. But I'm going to try to channel my inner Jonathan, because he's in the general Zoom area and we're in this, special Zoom area where we can speak. So it's fine. But
yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, can you? Oh, great. Hey,
you
how
can't
are
see
you?
me, but there you go. All right.
Oh, fantastic, Mr.
All right.
White. Welcome.
There you go. It works.
Well, before you get started, let me get a little background. So I'm gonna throw up all these different groups, if you will, and if everybody can see my what I've done there, these are what are referred to as the 5 forces of influence. And of course, we've now gone from 3 circles to 5 circles. I understand it's very confusing, but try to picture yourself understanding that your business is not just what you do at your desk or what you do in the field. It actually is about creating a lasting legacy. And what Jonathan's going to talk a little bit about is some of those attributes. So Jonathan, take it away. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Glad we were able to figure it out. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar. So, as Warner and Chad and Michael were talking about before, with all those other, there are all these overlapping circles, and you've got the same thing where you've got these circles going on here. And so aside from, you've got, and you can see, hopefully everybody can see the circles that we put up here. You've got, many of you may have a board, an outside board. Sometimes that board may include family members. Sometimes it may include more than family members. So you've got people like that who are a constituency, who's part of this whole combination. You've got the management team, which in some cases are family members, in some cases may be more than family members. You then have the family people who, as we talked about before, some of those may be active participants in the business. Sometimes they may not be active participants in the business. And as Chad was talking about, obviously those people bring very different perspectives to the table. And then there are shareholders who in some cases may be some of all of the above, but in some cases may not be, and may be just independent investors who have a stake in the business from this generation, from another generation, completely unrelated, and their economic interest is very specific. And in some cases, they're not involved with management anywhere near as closely as the first 3 circles, and they're looking at a bottom line and a return on investment. So they're a constituency. And all of these circles sort of interact and overlap. Obviously, in some small case, like in our cases, the board is the management, is the family, is the shareholder. And life is easy that way because you have less people in the room, for lack of a point there. But there are many cases where these constituencies are not the same people. And if they're not the same people, they're going to impact all the family business operations that we talked about. And that clearly complicates it. And so, you know, as a family business, I think there are several things. You have to think about the structure that you set up and who goes into which of these circles, the integration of those circles, how well do they work together or not work well together? What processes do you put in place to communicate among these circles? Because it is essential that if they're not the same people in each of these circles, or there's not a complete overlap, which there may not be, you've got people who will feel left out, upset, all those things if they're not included in what they perceive to be the right point for their decision making. And there has to be clearly, you know, each of these circles have different responsibilities, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And I think there has to be a clarity of understanding of what's expected of each one in these constituencies. So people understand that this group is responsible for that, and someone doesn't say, oh, I thought that was my job, or I thought you were doing that. Because when you end up with that kind of interaction, that just brings down the whole enterprise as well. So I think, you know, all these constituencies are really important players in this. And as you either set up or evolve your business, that's something to think about. And of course, part of the challenge is what you may have set up on day one may not work on year 2 or year 10 or year 30, because you know the players change, the circumstances change, the needs of the business change. So you know, I think this is something that can't be set in stone. On the other hand, it's not something you want to be changing every day either, because you do want stability and continuity in running the business. So I think, you know, you have to always be thinking the same way in that last slide about the circles and how things are not just as simple as it might seem. I think family businesses particularly have these kind of influences. Obviously, if you have a public company or a non-family business private company, you're going to have the same board, management, family, shareholder constituencies, but having the family as at least one, if not multiple parts of these circles is only going to complicate it. So,
well said. I'm ecstatic that we could figure out how to get you to speak,
because
you said it very eloquently. And you know, the only thing that I have to add, and what I was so impressed when you and I are talking, Jonathan, maybe you could speak a little bit about this before we move on to our final area, which is any questions, is that you have all these somewhat internal groups, but then, you know, to do a thing like to bring a product to market, you have these outside constituencies. You know, you have, and everybody's talking about it right now, supply chain, right? By the way, in school, during my MBA, supply chain was like the most boring thing ever we did, and inventory management. And now Elon Musk is like out there figuring out where to get the chips from the guys who make the chips, and you know, so can you talk a little bit about that so that we can, go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, and Jed's right on this, because you've got, you know, all these outside constituencies that are impacting these internal constituencies. I mean, I was at a meeting yesterday of CEOs where one of the speakers said, get your inventory up as high as your cash flow and your space will allow to minimize that. Another example is somebody in my management team said to me, we normally order this supply that helps us in our manufacturing facility. We roast coffee. And normally that's a supply that would take us 3 days to get, and now it takes 8 weeks. So I think part of the other constituency you have to think about that's outside are your vendors, are your customers, and how you have, how would I put it, frank, honest conversations with people about what your needs are and how they can help you in these challenging times. Because the more they do for you and the more you have a dialogue about it, they obviously are, in many cases, have longstanding relationships with the company, and it impacts all of these constituencies. Because if you don't have supplies to sell, then the shareholders' profits are impacted and the management's going to be blamed and the board's going to say, what the heck's going on? And the family is yelling at each other about who didn't do what. So I think you do have to think about more than ever how outside the traditional forces of influence can impact you. And customers are a big factor too. Customers are equally squeezed by everything going on. Everybody knows about price increases and everything. I think you can't communicate enough, both with vendors and with customers, and be proactive about it. And that helps move it along.
Chad,
Excellently said. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
just want to echo what Jonathan said. I think this is one of the times where we as family businesses can really play to the fact that for whatever reason, family businesses have a greater sense of trustworthiness in the market. And now all of the equity that we have built up over the years from previous generations of the way they were doing business, and that we hopefully have continued as the next generation, those conversations that Jonathan was referring to, hopefully can come off as being more sincere and a dialogue, not a too bad the prices are high and you got to deal with it, and we're just looking to pad our pockets. Just honest conversations with our constituencies wherever they fall. And just, I just wanted to echo what Jonathan said. I'm in complete agreement.
Yeah, the family. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Michael. The family business has the opportunity to now have another renaissance, if you will, because the world is looking for reliability. The world is looking for a relationship, and there is no greater group that understands the value of these relationships and the value of what it takes to bring things to market and to bring a project to completion. Then, in my opinion, I think our shared opinion, as the family business. One quick example, Plaza. So Plaza was founded by my great-grandparents in 1916. And for many years, it was in Jackson Heights on 37th and 74th. So right by the E and the F off Roosevelt. And that's where we were. And Dad said to me when I joined, you know what, we should find a new campus that is more reflective of where our students are growing. We need more space, so on and so forth. So we found something, but would you know, and it's uncanny this happened, the campus that we were in burned to the ground 6 months before we were ready to move into the new one, right? The lease was done. We had demoed the new space, but another tenant in that building had an issue. Now, any normal business, right? And I say normal business, where you don't have a family, where you don't have owners in there, they might maybe throw in the towel. Maybe they'll say, you know what, let's wait for the insurance. I'll tell you what, I sat in my dad's car with my dad outside that building for 3 weeks. We figured it out. And we made it. I think the strength of the family is what gave me personally strength to be able to see through that fire and ultimately bounce back. And we have many friends in the chamber. We've been with the chamber a long time, so we've been here, and you all have been so great to us. But I just want to share that because I think that we all have that core strength. That it's not just the business, it's not just the product, it's the family, and that is something that can, if not treated well, can actually become our detriment if we don't pay attention to it. So I just wanted to say that. Warner, before we turn over to questions, I wanted to kick it back to you for the final word.
Sure. I just want to make sure on a mechanical point here. Can everybody see the 5 circles? In the background, we have the constituencies, which represent the employees, community, suppliers, customers, and then can be the government too, and also the folks that provide outside financing in terms of debt and that sort of thing, letter credit. There's a board, shareholder, family, and management in addition to the constituency. So you should be seeing 5 circles there, and I hope that answers somebody's question on that. I think Jonathan and Chad and Michael, what you all touched upon are just extremely important points. And the only thing I would add is that, the family businesses and families have a long view. They care about the next generation. And if you look at the green part of this of these circles here, the family, it does start with the family. It's the family's values and principles. And it's just not their financial goals, but There's a lot more to it than that. And that does carry into the shareholders as being owners of the business. And it's very important for them to express that to the board. All companies have a board, and that and the board then communicates that to the management. And if the management cannot, or find it difficult to carry forward some of the desires of the family, and that's not just financial metrics or returns or distributions or something, but it's also the principles, such as certain policies on, how to deal with environmental issues or social issues or employment issues and so forth, and what kind of business they want, reflective of their values. But that those issues come from, are provided to the shareholders, the board, the management, and they come back to the board and the shareholders, and then back to the family that they can't implement them, or they'd like them to be tweaked and so forth. So there's a whole system here that works together. And then, of course, with the constituencies, you want these values and principles, overarching ones, to carry through. And, they can be extremely healthy to an entire organization and become part of your brand, if you will, and reputation in the community and throughout the industry as a very reliable, trustworthy company that people want to do business with, people want to work for. And these are just to mention a few, beginning to be the elements of a really wonderful, sustainable business over generations. And so, yeah, the family that's behind these wonderful businesses, it's so important for them to meet and through some decision-making process, family governance or whatever, and to try to articulate these things that I've talked about to the shareholders and hence to the board and the management and so forth. And then out to the suppliers and everybody else that, this is the way we do business, and these are our principles. And if you go to companies like SC Johnson and some of the other ones, you'll find these principles very well memorialized internationally in some documents, and they're fantastic. So, I think we've done an awful lot going from sort of the basics all the way through some very, very powerful ways to think about your family business system. So I've enjoyed this, and thank you for including me, Chad.
Well, thank you for thanking us, but this would not have been possible without Warner's guidance and leadership, and for our entire board and group. So right now, what I'd like to do is ask any individuals that have questions. There's time for that to raise their hands. I think Jeff is going to enable microphones so you can come off mute. Also, you can type any questions in the general chat box, and we will stay with you and try and answer your questions. So will the webinar be shared with the participants? Yes, I believe and Jeff Gross, who also deserves our thanks, is really responsible for organizing us and keeping us on track. And I think he is going to send this out, but this will also be available through the website, right? Right, Jeff? It'll appear on YouTube. Thank you so much, Jeff. While we were waiting for additional questions, I'll also ask the members here, those who participated, if you have any topics that are important to you and to your family business, please let us know. You can email us. We're all on the share, but also you could type right into the chat. Mike mentioned succession planning. That is a very big topic. It is something that is a little bit nerve-wracking to think of for some folks, because they say, who are we going to get? But we all aren't here forever. So we have to make sure we keep the business going by cultivating new and interested family leaders. So that'll probably be our next presentation.
Chad, while people are thinking of this, maybe you can go back to one slide, and there's one idea here to tease out some thoughts here. The following, the 5 forces of influence, I think would work.
Sure.
Probably the best to talk from. So as this entire family enterprise system is considered, with each one of these subsystems, there are a lot of topics that you might want to think about, such as, how do families make decisions together? How do you deal with conflict? What is family governance? How do you deal with, discussing difficult, topics? How do families develop their vision, their values, and so forth? And then when it comes to shareholders, there's sometimes gaps in understanding the shareholder rights, and that includes minority shareholder rights, as well as the role and expectations that shareholders should be playing in a family business. And then also the board, what are the fiduciary responsibilities of a board members? And then how do you plan for a succession? Topics like how many family members should be on the board, and its composition, and how do you initiate a board? And then in management, not only succession planning, but how did siblings work together? How do you think about long-term reinvestment? How about strategy in terms of diversification of the business? At what point you should be considering that? And then of course constituencies. How do you deal with policies? How do you develop policies that are good for employees and for your suppliers and so forth? A lot of HR things there, but as well as supply chain management, communications, and so on and so forth. Each one of these groups, by the way, is a legally defined group. So, for example, you can go into New York State set of statutes and look up constituency statutes, and that does provide some guidance to the management and the board about the types of things that you can think about when you're making a decision. And it's not maximizing the return all the time. It's building a long-term sustainable shareholder value while considering, or you're permitted to consider, constituencies. So it doesn't always mean producing the maximum profit. It might be you're able to consider using some of the profits or some of the assets of the company to build a childcare center, or maybe pay for childcare, or offer some other benefits, or improve lighting or whatever it is. It's just far beyond what people realize you're able to do. And it's not just all about maximizing profits, or what people think about. So I just think that there's so many different topics here, and you may not be thinking of them right now, but over time, if you do come up with some ideas, share them with the committee, send them to Jeff, and this will help guide future content. So those
Very
are
good.
just some ideas.
I also see that we have some members from our committee that was responsible for putting together the content that was presented today with us, in addition to those that spoke. Loisant is here, as well as Bobby, Mike's brother. That we know more about Bobby than anybody else, because he was the topic of conversation. So if you gents want to say, if there's anything you guys would like to add, please, it's open mic.
Hi, everybody. This is Loisant Gordon, own Historic Nearest Tavern. I actually asked a question to the committee anonymously, but I'm a first generation owner of a historic business that's been around longer than I've been around, and a family owned it from 1898 to about 1967, and maybe 2 or 3 other families. And so I'm probably like the 4th owner. And I am looking to, eventually, it would be nice to have this business be family owned and passed on. So I'm just in the process of thinking about what that actually means for some of the veterans that actually has, their business been in the family for, a century or more. Especially when I have one son who's 5 years old, and who knows what's going to happen with him in his direction, right? So that's just my comment, and I'm glad to be participating in the committee to try to discover some of these answers. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Loyson, I'm glad I put you on the spot because that was a great comment that we all share. We all have, maybe not 5 years old, but we all have that image of that 5-year-old son and what to do for the business to make sure it's here for that generation, for that person, for that interest group. You had a great idea earlier on in our discussions of creating a designation to the family business, which I think was kind of something that none of us were even really thinking of, but that's something that we want to explore as well in future meetings. So thanks so much for offering that.
You're welcome. And definitely that's something that definitely looking into. So that's thank you for acknowledging that.
You bet. All right. If there's no other questions, we're probably going to wrap up for today, and we'll make sure this presentation gets out to you. We'll also include you as the group continues. We'd like to recruit some new members to our working group, people that can offer some different perspective, so that as we develop content and continue to bring you new information, it's relevant to everybody and it can be applied everywhere. So thank you so much. Thank you to Warner, Mike, Jonathan, Jeff, everybody that participated, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Chad.